make membership memorable. We need to make these little tiny M&Ms that every time you take a bite, it triggers those memories of positivity. When somebody comes into your club, they get a little nugget of that memorable moment inside of that M&M. We need to create those. Create the space to make that. We need to make membership memorable. And so, I'm going to talk about my grandfather. How many people have heard the story about my grandfather? Mr. Nelson? A couple people. All right. So my grandfather grew up in Louisiana, which is a state in Pennsylvania, in a very small town. The town did not have a lot of money. It was a black town, and there was a lot of racism going on. There were not many opportunities in this area. My grandfather, though, with my grandmother's help, figured out a way to make membership memorable for a lot of people in this small town in Louisiana. He was able to become a principal at multiple schools and was able to create very memorable moments for teachers and administrative staff. He was also able to install water and sanitation systems for the community. He worked with government officials and he worked with politicians in order to make these things happen. He made membership memorable for these groups. He formed little teams. He even worked with fraternities in different areas in professional development for the folks in this town. If you go to Louisiana right now and you ask about Mr. Nelson, my grandfather has passed away for a good 20 years at this point. You ask about Mr. Nelson, everyone still will say, oh, I know who Mr. Nelson was because a lot of the things that we have were done because of Mr. Nelson. Now, the cool thing about this is that my grandfather was never a Rotarian. And there was nothing that he didn't form a club. He never said, here, wear this emblem, come to my club, join my club. You know, there are dues and there's meeting times and you have to open up your emails all the time and make sure you process it. No, he just said, let's do something amazing together. And he made those memorable moments happen for not only the people that he was serving, but the communities that he was working with. And we're going to use a lot of the tactics from Mr. Nelson's point of view to go through some of the solutions. Are y'all still with me? Say yeah.
Yeah.
Are y'all still with me? Say yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. We're going to have to keep doing, I want it a little bit louder next time that we go through this. All right? So, we have 4 problems here. And we have my grandfather as kind of a guiding light to help us get through this. World events, we all know what they are. Information overload, way too much to process. Status quo, here are going to be the ways in which we address it. Some of you have seen some of these items before, but I modify them a little bit. I had a lot of great conversations with folks over the past day and a half. It feels like 4 weeks because, time changes and whatnot. But I talked to a lot of folks here, and it really inspired some of the way that I would like to express approaching making membership memorable. We need to make membership memorable. We need to do it in an effective way. Create these little tiny M&Ms as we go through. First, seems simple. How are you? One of the things that if we're trying to address the world events that are happening, all the things that are occurring in our lives, we need to be able to ask ourselves first this question. A lot of us have gone through a lot. I met a lady when I first got here. I only brought these dress shoes and I was like, hey, I'll go to the airport and just find a pair of sneakers, I'll buy them. I didn't realize that I was going to the airport at night and there were no stores open. So all of my travels, I have these tight dress shoes. So the first thing I do when I get here, after Andy drops me off, he's like, see you, Jason. I'm like, okay. I go to find a pair of shoes and I step outside the hotel my first time in Australia and I'm just like, where the heck am I, right? And this one lady just happens to be walking by and she's like, hey. I'm like, hi. She's like, you know where you're going? I was like, nope. She's like, and I told her why. I was looking for a pair of shoes. She's like, hey, I'm going that direction. Why don't you join me? So she takes me, guides me across the intersections, through the traffic, down the beach. We walk along the beach, we talk. And she shares a large portion of her life story to me within 15 minutes. I see people nodding their heads like this is a common thing. It's not common for me though, right? But the one thing that she expressed to me was, she asked me how I was doing and I asked her how she was doing. And she was like, I'm in a much better place now. I went through a lot of, last year, she said, her name was Kay. She said, I went through so many things. Everything that I tried to do failed. Everything that I tried to do just seemed like it wasn't working. But I found some people in my life that I was able to connect with, and I was able to make something really meaningful for me, make something very memorable for me. And this question of how you were doing, and she said, I wasn't doing well. And I struggled, and I needed to reach out to people. And I think this is the foundation, the beginnings of talking about clubs and district, is talking about you as individuals first. There's a lot of things that have gone on in our lives. We have to ask ourselves, how looking in the mirror and just say, how are you doing? Then when you're able to be like, okay, I kind of get a gist. Might need a little bit of help, but I'm okay. Then it's that she's speaking of privilege to be able to then say to somebody else in your Rotary Club, how are you doing? Before you get into the weeds and the how-tos and the strategy, ask them how they are doing and not just be like, hey, how you doing? Good, all right, I'll see you later. Ask them. These are the times and moments in which we need to connect to people in the most intimate of ways. And even if we are not able to be vulnerable at this time, it is a responsibility for those that have that capacity to reach out to everybody else. Because that is the foundation of making something memorable. When you think about your kids, when you think about your wife, those are the relationships that are personal. We need to continue doing that. Otherwise, nobody will want to join what we do or stick around for what we do. There was a gentleman that I spoke to while I was here, and he just finished renovating his house. He was working on his house, renovating it for years, 10, 15 years, fixing it up. Everything was perfect. And a flood's happened. I don't rip everything out. Now, for me to go up to this individual and be like, hey, do you have time to send out the membership email today? Like, that's not even checking with that human being. No, we cannot move forward by just going with the status quo and just saying, hey, do your job. That's not what we're about. We're about the people. We need to be checking in and connecting with folks along the way.